This is how you can get permanent residency in Australia if you are a chef. To apply independently, you'll need to be invited through an expression of interest. To lodge an expression of interest, you'll need to meet the English requirements, which is score competent English. However, the higher your points, the more likely and faster you'll get invited, so try to get superior English. You'll need to get a full skills assessment. You can get this through Trades Recognition Australia. If you studied your certificates here in Australia, you might be eligible for a skills assessment through the Job Ready program, which requires you to work 1 year after you complete your course. If you completed your qualification offshore or you didn't complete the Job Ready program here in Australia within the timeframes, you'll need to prove that you have at least 3 years of full-time work experience. It can be before or after the qualification, and you'll need to do it through Trades Recognition Australia. Once you have these, you'll be able to make an expression of interest to be invited. As a chef, you can apply for the 189 visa, or you could apply for the 491 or 190 depending on the state criteria. Here's what you need to know about the Direct Entry 186 visa. First of all, this is an employer-sponsored visa, so you'll need to have an eligible employer sponsor you for this visa. There's no requirement for the employer to be a standard business sponsor. They'll just need to lodge a nomination and you'll need to lodge a visa application. The employer must pay you at the market salary rate and provide you with employment for at least 2 years from the date of the visa grant. For yourself, you'll need to make sure that you have a full skills assessment in an eligible occupation on the core skills occupation list. You need to make sure that you have a valid English test and that you have the relevant qualification and at least 3 years of post-qualification work experience. If you don't have the relevant qualification, depending on your occupation, you might be able to still apply for this visa if you have more work experience, which can be used in lieu of the qualification. You can include your dependents, such as your spouse and children, on your application.
There is this visa called the 186 Direct Entry visa, and you can get your permanent residency, but you must be sponsored by your employer. So let's briefly go through the requirements for it. So first of all, you need to have an employer who's willing to sponsor you, and you need to have a skills assessment in an eligible occupation. That occupation must be on the CSOL list or skills occupation list, and that only changed recently. So let's just say, for example, you're a mechanical engineer and you work for an engineering company. You haven't been able to receive an invitation for the 189 or 190 maybe, but your employer is willing to support you for this. It's time to speak to them about this visa. Now, for them, they'll need to make sure that they can sponsor you, so they can provide you a job for at least 2 years, and they're financially viable, they're a lawfully operating business. So they'll need to provide documentation such as their ABN and ASIC search, last 2 years of financials, last 2 years of tax returns, business activity statements, lease agreements, organizational chart, bank statements. These are just some of the documents that we will request from the employer. They need to nominate you in that position, so they need to provide you with an employment contract, and they need to be paying you the market salary rate. Now, there is a minimum salary threshold, which is $76,515. However, it also needs to be what the market rate is. So if you're an engineer with at least 3 years of work experience, you're probably going to be paid above that. So you need to make sure that that is what the employer is actually offering you. And we do that through conducting market salary research. And if this is wrong, you could get a refusal, or the employer can get a refusal for their nomination. However, if all those documents are provided and everything else is satisfied, then you can lodge your visa application. You can lodge this after the nomination is lodged, or you can lodge this after the nomination is approved. You'll need to provide that you have evidence of English, so you need at least competent English. You'll need to provide that full skills assessment. You need to prove that you have the relevant qualification, plus at least 3 years of full-time post-qualification work experience. You can include your dependents on the application. However, it is important to note that you must meet the character and health criteria. If you don't meet the character criteria, you could get the visa refused. And for this visa, you have to meet the health criteria as well, because there's no health waiver for the 186 Direct Entry visa. That is only available for the 186 visa under the Temporary Residence Transition Stream, which is a whole different visa with a whole different set of requirements. So I hope that was helpful, and you can speak to your employer about it.
Okay, so this bill has now been passed.
It gives the ART power to make a decision on an ART application based on papers. So for some types of visas, there will be no hearing process if that's what they decide. They can just make a decision based on the information that you've provided. And I know a lot of the time people submit ART applications and don't really provide much evidence at the time. So it applies to the following visa types: student visas and other temporary visas. Permanent visas and protection visas won't be affected. We're talking about the 8580 condition and what documents you can provide to prove the address of all your employers. So obviously you can work a couple of jobs. Technically, you can work from home for a metropolitan company as long as you don't travel to the city. But what you can provide to prove their address is your employment contract. Their address should be on there, their website, which proves their address. And if you like, you could even provide an ASIC document which shows where their registered office is.